The days of turning on the news and waiting to see what the next catastrophe is are over. The days of the government turning on the television and watching feverishly to see what the people are doing next are beginning. Recently, I stumbled across an article that listed off 10 reasons that may demonstrate that you're a part of a cult. As I read through this list, I realized the similarities between this and a movement that I have long considered to be a cult. What is that movement, you might ask? The climate change cult. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone who wants to do good for the environment is somehow a part of a cult. I am suggesting, however, that if you believe that the world is going to come to a catastrophic end in the very near future due to man-made climate change, you're in the cult. If you believe that we should switch from eating meat to eating insects as our main source of protein because of cow farts, you're in the cult.
Here we have crickets. Oh, like nothing you've ever tasted. Like a hairy nut.
And in either of those scenarios, you're going to want to listen to what I have to say. In my last video about mass formation and how it works, I demonstrated how mass formations can create the adherence to some seemingly absurd rules and regulations.
I always wear a mask in my car because my grandfather fought in World War II and I'm trying to be just as brave.
And that it created an environment where people were simply unwilling to hear factual information and would disregard it if it wasn't coming from an approved quote-unquote source. For our YouTube viewers, I'm going to add that to the end screen of this video. So if you don't know what mass formation is and you have no idea what it's about, you may want to skip to the end, watch that video, and then come back and join us. So let's take a look at these 10 signs and see exactly how they fit in with today's climate cult. The first of these warning signs is absolute authoritarianism with no accountability. This one is a softball. The narrative for climate change has been owned by a select group of elites, namely the WEF and other globalists, to convince the world that we are in dire straits and that impending doom is coming due to man-made climate change. This narrative persists even when scandals emerge. Can you say ClimateGate? The second of these warning signs is that there's absolutely no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry. Now, this is in play for every single government narrative in existence. Whether it's climate change, Wuhan lab leaks, vaccines, gain-of-function research, election integrity, the list goes on. Those people will be silenced, attacked by the government media machine, as well as other cult members, and told they are believing the big lie, or they're deniers, or anti-vaxxers, or maybe insurgents. And again, the list goes on. The third warning sign is that there's no meaningful financial disclosure. No budgets, no expenditures, no public statements, no independent inquiry into their finances. The funding for Big Green is pretty much unlimited and comes from sources that nobody even knows exist. While much of it comes from governments and your tax dollars, much more of it comes from shady organizations that I see as money laundering operations, such as the Bill Gates Foundation, Clinton Foundation, and an endless spew of additional small organizations that are all donated to mostly by these larger ones to help fund these projects. These smaller organizations, as well as the larger, aren't accountable to anyone. The fourth warning sign that you may be a part of a cult is the unreasonable fear that some sort of catastrophe, impending doom, or other such nonsense is about to come to be. Isn't the world going to end in 12 years?
What I'm saying is the planet's on f***ing fire.
The fifth warning sign that you may be in a cult is that people who leave are always labeled as either being wrong for leaving, negative, or even evil. This one is also very self-evident. Those who have invested a lot of time, energy, and really even some dedicated their lives to such movements have really no interest in admitting to any wrong. ClimateGate came out, and none of these people really cared. Not to mention, I've already named all the names and slurs that people are generally called and labeled as if they should choose to break from the narrative and leave the cult. So let's move on. Number 6. Members of the cult that have left usually report the same grievances. They're usually called the same names, suffer the same consequences, such as the thousands of scientists who have questioned the man-made nature of climate change and have also questioned the severity of the repercussions of climate change.
And I think we're all gonna die!
Most of these scientists are shunned by the scientific community, certainly attacked by the government's mainstream media, and suffer other repercussions that are all similar in line. This is why so many government-approved scientists don't break from the narrative. Now for number 7. There are usually records, books, articles, TV shows, all written and produced to show evil abuses by the leader. Now this one is particularly unique since the leader in this case, or the government, is also in control of the media, books, articles, etc. And mostly, in this case, they align to support the narrative rather than to shoot it down. Whereas smaller cults, of course, they will all align against them and produce these articles, videos, etc. in order to shame the leader. But when the people who write these articles and make these mass media videos are all in the cult, it changes the dynamic a little bit. So number 7 will have to go off on its own. Number 8, they feel like they're never good enough. Well, this could be shown in the fact that climate change cultists, no matter how hard they try and no matter how great the efforts they make, the world's always going to end in the next 12 years. Number 9, the group leader is always right.
Even he knows that.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
And lastly, number 10, the group leader is the only source of truth. Now, this is demonstrated in a ton of different ways on actually quite a few narratives that the government puts out. First off, the creepy government narrative of misinformation. Of course, misinformation is defined as any information that disagrees with the government.
And one of the ways they define influence operations, it's in bullet 3, is someone who says that government officials are corrupt.
Or, the cult. That is demonstrated through government control of social media platforms, who's allowed to speak, who's not allowed to speak, the laundering of censorship through these technology companies, and their clear control of the mass media and the narratives that they produce. Didn't the Department of Homeland Security actually try to create a government disinformation board? The similarities are striking, and it's a perfect follow-up to my video on mass formation. The goal of these videos is to get people to look at things critically and ask questions about the government whenever things don't make sense. You might be in the middle of a cult, but if you start asking those questions when things don't start to make sense, you may be able to break out of it. We can all work together to do our part to try and help the environment and live cleaner, more green lives. The thing is, we can do this without destroying humanity. We can do this without destroying people's lives along the way. We can do this without having first world countries worry about heating their homes in cold winters, when the energy is perfectly available.
Cities plunged into darkness. No light, no water, and no heating. A scenario Germany's Cities and Communities Association warns could soon become reality.
We can do this without forcing people to eat insects instead of meat because cows fart too much.
I am here to reveal my hidden talent, eating micro livestock, cornworms. They're still alive. Extraordinary.
We can do this without trampling on the freedoms of the world's population. It can be done without disrupting the world's food supply, leaving many vulnerable nations set for starvation of millions of people.
Something that I know was talked about through the pandemic, that, crises like the pandemic and now like the one on the back of the war in Ukraine present an opportunity to sort of reset our system.
And lastly, it can be done without destroying the cultural history of many nations. The fact is, the world is not going to end in 12, 20, or even 30 or 50 years. The fact is, every single scientific model that has ever come out over any topic ever has been wrong. And that matters. And they're always wrong because they never account for human ingenuity. Not accounting for human ingenuity is a big deal. There was a day where they were considering that we were going to run out of all oil and that this would be a catastrophe, and in order to avoid it, we needed to take drastic changes, many of which would have seriously disrupted the lives of millions upon millions of people. However, fortunately, we ignored these idiots and their models, and the reality of the matter is we ended up figuring out new ways to produce oil, new ways to find oil, and new ways to refine oil. In fact, today, we have more than enough to go ahead and handle the gap between now and when technologies like solar, wind, or even fusion for that matter, become viable. One good hypothetical example to make the point of the lack of accounting for human ingenuity in these ridiculous models that these scientists create would be fusion. Scientists have been working incredibly hard in trying to crack the code to fusion. Nuclear fusion, once cracked, would then produce more energy than it takes to create it. What does that mean? It means it would be a limitless supply of energy for the world, green energy, energy with no emissions. This would be perfect.
Creating mini-stars inside reactors like this is one of the greatest technological challenges humanity has ever faced. Get it right, and it holds out the potential for producing almost unlimited supplies of energy pretty much forever.
Now the question would be this. If they crack this code in the next 20, 30, 40, even 50 years, everything that happened before it with solar, wind, and everything else would be a moot point. So then let me ask you this. How many lives do you think we would have destroyed in the process of getting to that point? On the pace we're at today, it would be over 1 billion easy in the next 50 years. That is not okay. The fact is, even with today's technologies, solar, wind, etc., it is not unthinkable that in the next 15 to 20 years, that solar will make it to a point where it's actually practical, where it can actually be used to power the many things that we need to power. It's okay today. It's okay to do for a home. I have solar myself. However, it's not something that's going to sustain an entire nation. And that's where the key comes in. This is why they need you to believe that the world's going to end in 15 to 20 years. Because they don't want you being okay waiting for that. Because the fact of the matter is, we'll all go solar if it were practical. We'll all go solar if it were something that were doable. But it's not. It's not ready yet to power entire nations. And the reality of the matter is, we have plenty of energy resources to go ahead and let it work itself out. But if you're in the cult, you believe the world's going to be over by then, so it won't matter. And that's where the cult comes in. The grim reality is that most people who are fully engaged in the cult and have really bought into the mass formation will never even make it to this part of the video. So it's up to the rest of us to slow the cult down, get it in check, and bring the country back to rational thinking. To do this in the United States at least, the only way to get it accomplished is to redefine the relationship between we the people and the government, since the government is the cult leader. We must change the relationship back to the way it was originally intended when the nation was founded and the Constitution was written. And that's where the people control the government, not the other way around. We can no longer allow an environment where the government and a handful of elites, whether they're elected or unelected, can go ahead and make changes that become catastrophic for humanity, regardless of what the people want, because of goals that they want to attain that they believe are going to save the world, regardless if they're wrong. We cannot live in an environment where these elites can go ahead and make decisions accepting mass human suffering as just collateral damage to a larger goal. This is why I scream from the highest mountain on this channel to support the one thing that we can control. What is this thing? This thing is the calling of a convention of states under Article 5 of our Constitution for proposing amendments that will forcibly knock the federal government back in line. The key word here is forcibly. They won't do it on their own. The founders of this great nation understood one thing, that when they created this federal government, that there should be a healthy fear that this federal government would eventually, not knowing how long it might take, but would eventually grow out of control. And once that happens, there's going to be no accountability. They would no longer care what the people think, because the reality of the matter is, no matter who gets elected, the machine itself will transform that elected official, as opposed to the American people being able to elect those to change it. It was from this fear that the second clause of Article 5 was added to the Constitution. Think of it as a fail-safe. Think of it as an in case of emergency break glass. Well, it's time to smash the crap out of that glass. Once again, the founders' foresight has proven to be totally astounding. While the three main topic issues in the current calling of a convention of states are incredibly important and will have a significant impact on our future and our relationship with government, those three topics are term limits for all government officials, not just elected, fiscal restraints on the federal government, and amendments on government overreach of authority and power. The real impact doesn't come from any one amendment. It comes from the idea that we can do this and the precedent that will be set forevermore. The idea that the people can grab the federal government, bend it over its knee, and spank it for misbehaving is an idea that will change the dynamic of everything we look at today, everything we know today, everything we feel today about the relationship between federal government and the people. Once a convention is called, regardless of what amendments get proposed or ratified, the end result is going to be that the process is legitimate and that the process exists. And the people who call for this process are still going to be out there. So whenever the government misbehaves in the future, on any topic, even those not covered under this current convention, like let's say the border, the people will then have the power to start making waves, and the government will have no choice but to look over its shoulder constantly, worrying about what it is that the people are out there looking to do. Isn't that the way it's supposed to be in the first place? Imagine the government sitting back and thinking about these diabolical plans that they've put in place today, knowing that every move they make is under heavy scrutiny by the American people, and that at any point, the American people can step up, raise their voice, call a convention, and smack it down. And each time they screw up like that, there would be a little bit more power lost by the federal government, something that they treasure more than anything else. So you can bet once that calling begins, no matter what the topic may be, anyone in federal government is going to rethink the policy. This is how we change the game forever. If they get too cozy with globalists or any other of these sociopaths, and they hear that we're stepping up and about to shut it down, that ends it right there. We don't even need to call a convention. They know what the end result will be. My message to the people who are out there today watching this video who think that the problems that we face as a nation and as a world are out of control and something that we cannot have a serious impact on except by electing one leader after another who all fall into the machine, you're wrong. And I'm here to bring you some good news in the sense that there are things that we can control, and this is one of them. It's time we started thinking big. It's time we stopped looking at the minutiae of one little violation of our rights after another. It's time we address the whole kit and caboodle. And the reality of the matter is, the path to do this is under Article 5. You no longer have to watch on television these sociopaths creating one crisis after another with no one there to challenge it. And also sit back and watch them take our beloved republic from us without anything you can say. You no longer have to play defense. You can join the Convention of States movement and the millions of Americans in 19 states that have already passed resolutions to call for it and help us take this back. And by doing so, go on the offensive. The days of turning on the news and waiting to see what the next catastrophe is are over. The days of the government turning on the television and watching feverishly to see what the people are doing next are beginning. We've well passed the time where the federal government and these global elites are out watching to see what we are up to, rather than us being mad about what they are up to. In the end, it's not a metaphor. We really do hold the power. The question of the matter is, do we use it? So how do you take action? How do you start the process? Well, how does this journey of 1,000 miles begin with the first single step? Go to www.thepatriotthinktank.com, click on the cause link, and go ahead and follow these steps. Click on your state to see where it's at in the process. This will give you an idea of just how dire it is and how impactful you can be. The second thing you should do is go and click the Sign Petition button, because that will take you to the Convention of States website. While you're there, click on the volunteer button and sign the petition. Once you sign the petition, Convention of States Action will send a letter to your local representative on your behalf. Now, you should follow that letter up with a handwritten letter, because everybody reads handwritten letters. And then think of 10 people that you know that you can get to join as well. This is how organic grassroots movements work. Once you've completed that process, someone local to you from Grassroots of Convention of States Action will reach out to you and let you know what's going on locally in your area that you can help with. Maybe you have no time, but you have some money to contribute. Maybe you have no money, but you have some time to contribute. Maybe you have neither, but you can do some work on social media to help educate others and encourage more Americans to wake up. There's a million things that you can do to help out and participate and begin to play offense and fight back against the globalist cult that is taking over most of the world right now. This is how we fight. This is how we win. The faster you act, the faster this goes through. Every state where the grassroots are on fire and begin to educate their local legislators on what Article 5 is and how it works and why it's going to save our nation, the more states that join the fight. But it all starts with you. If we allow this republic to fall and in turn allow the world to fall, there's no one to blame but the American people. This is George Gavaris for the Patriot Think Tank. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, click the bell, get alerts, and share this wherever possible. I'm out.
And like that,